Welcome to this rapid revision video, which consists of my predictions for the Edexcel Pearson Paper 1 in 2025 for GCSE History. The topics I'll be covering are medicine through time, crime and punishment through time, and warfare through time. I'm afraid I won't be doing migration through time. I simply don't have enough experience with this paper. If you want to skip ahead to the section that's relevant to you, check out the comment which has been pinned below, which will give the timestamps for the various topics. Okay, let's get into it. Firstly, a reminder of the changes to the paper in this year 2025. In 2024 and earlier, these were the questions that you would find within the paper. There's one key change here, and that is to the describe two features question, which was worth 4 marks. Here's how it's changed. So 2025, question 1 has become question 1A and question 1B. Each will now be worth 2 marks. You'll need to give one example about 2 different areas of knowledge. So for example, in the medicine through time topic, it might be describe one feature of blood transfusions on the Western Front and describe one feature of something different like the base hospitals. This is probably a change for the better. It allows you to show a bit more breadth of knowledge, and if you are unlucky and you simply don't have any knowledge on something that comes up, you've got another chance for the second one. Before I proceed, a little bit of a shameless plug. Have I helped you? If yes, help me to help others. I'm a full-time history teacher and head of department. Originally, these videos were just made for my students. It was a bit of a lockdown project during COVID. Now I know that I help many thousands of others too. I've also added crime and punishment and Cold War rapid revision playlists on top of my day job workload. These are things that aren't useful to my students, and I've done it simply for my YouTube subscribers and for other people. So if you want to thank me, please do subscribe to the channel, and it helps get the word out there. I'm never going to charge for my content. I'm not going to start a Patreon or anything like that. So this is a good way of saying thank you if you'd like to, and if I've helped you. Now on to the predictions. Please treat these predictions with a certain amount of caution. Last year I got quite a few predictions right, but I've got to be honest with you, it's only educated guesswork. These predictions are actually more of a demonstration of what topics have only appeared infrequently since 2018. As we've seen, the exam boards often use the same topics repeatedly. So the only way of being sure is to try and know everything. And I know that's not what you necessarily want to hear. So here's how you can use this video. Don't just focus your revision on the predictions. Instead, if a prediction happens to be an area that you know you're weak on, use that to guide the rest of your revision. Okay, into medicine through time first. Let's consider what came up on the paper last year, 2024. Section A on the Western Front. Describe 2 features of new techniques used in the treatment of wounds on the Western Front. Then 2A was how useful are sources A and B for an inquiry into the work of medical staff at the casualty clearing stations on the Western Front, and then the follow-up inquiry. Then section B, explain one way in which the treatment of infectious diseases in the medieval period, 1250 to 1500, was different from the treatment of infectious diseases in the modern period, around 1900 to the present. Then explain why there was little change in medicine in England during the medieval period, 1250 to 1500. The stimulus points given were Galen and monastery hospitals, and that was worth 12 marks. Then the 2 16 markers. There was significant progress in medical knowledge in England during the Renaissance period, 1500 to 1700. How far do you agree? William Harvey and the Great Plague were the ones that were given as stimulus points, and as it happens, for what it's worth, this one was more popular with my students. Then the other one was the role of individuals was the most important factor in the prevention of illness in the years 1700 to the present. How far do you agree, with the stimulus points being Edward Jenner and the anti-smoking campaigns? So what topics might appear this year? Well, perhaps some of these will appear again, but as they only came up last year, perhaps they won't come up this year. Of course, the moment I say that, that's the year that Edexcel decided to stick them in, isn't it? It's worth bearing in mind what repeated inclusions we've had. If things have come up frequently, they may come up again. Or if they've come up very recently and frequently, it might mean that they're going to choose something else this year. We will see. Medieval doctors and hospitals has appeared in 2018, 2019, 2020 and 2022, which does mean that it's not appeared for about 3 years. Medieval treatment and prevention came up in the sample paper 2021, 2023 and last year 2024. Vesalius came up in the sample paper 2021 and 2023, so actually, although he's come up a few times, maybe he's due a look this year as well. Harvey came up in the sample paper 2023 and last year 2024, but the most popular was Thomas Sydenham, 2018, 2020 and 2023. Industrial surgery, anaesthetics, antiseptics, etc. has come up in 2018, 2020, 2021 and 2022, so it's been a few years, but it has come up quite a lot. And modern causes of illness, looking at, for example, DNA and hereditary illness, has come up in 2019, 2020 and 2022. But again, although that's come up repeatedly, it has been a while. And lastly, public health reformers. That's come up in the sample paper, 2021, 2023 and last year, 2024. But there are quite a lot of them, so again, this could be something that comes up again. Almost by definition, this section will get smaller every year. These are the topics that have never appeared. In Section A, there's never been a discrete question on key battles, but in truth, I don't think there ever will be. Knowledge of key battles is actually important every year. It allows you to contextualise the sources that you're dealing with, so relating what you're reading to the conditions in the Battle of the Somme, for example. So I doubt there'd ever be a discrete question just on this. Then there's Section B. Surgery in the Middle Ages and medieval public health policy have effectively been cut from the specification to manage the amount of content, but it's still quite useful knowledge for knowing about medieval healers and also the preventions that the medieval people tried, for example during the Black Death. Perhaps a better bet would be modern improvements in diagnosis, the use, for example, of CAT scans and MRI machines to try and predict what people's illnesses are, but also things like DNA. Magic bullets hasn't come up either, so maybe this year we'll have Salvarsan 606 or sulfonamides or those other things that were designed to seek out and kill bacteria. These topics have only rarely appeared. In Section A, the treatment of injuries is a massive topic, and it did appear as a 4-mark question last year, but it is so huge I wouldn't be surprised if it turned up again. Trench warfare and trench systems again is largely about contextual knowledge, but you might get a discrete question on it. In fact, the last time that happened was 2018, so it's been a good long while. And then there's the really broad section on the medical services. Groups like the Royal Army Medical Corps, the First Aid Nursing Yeomanry and nursing services. Although I should point out that the casualty clearing stations, as part of the evacuation route, appeared in last year's exam. But specific knowledge on these different groups would probably be handy. Then there's Section B. Medieval and Renaissance causes of illness last appeared in 2018, and this is a really big topic. For example, this might be a good one where there's a comparison question, looking at the differences or the similarities between these two different periods. The Black Death, I'm absolutely amazed to say, has only really appeared once. That was last year, but it was only worth 4 marks. Again, this is a really important case study. I wouldn't be at all surprised if it came up again, and it's something that really you ought to know about. If you know about the Black Death, then you know about causes of illness, really. Also, Renaissance hospitals. Hospitals in the Middle Ages have turned up, but not the changes in Renaissance hospitals, things like plague houses and the greater use of doctors and cures in them. This only really appeared in 2018 last. Healthy living and lifestyles in the modern period was relevant in 2024, particularly for the anti-smoking campaigns, for example. But it's a broad area, so again, another one that you might want to look at. Also, penicillin was last relevant last year, being as part of a 4-mark question. But again, it's a really important topic, and it's linked to lots of other things like the role of government and warfare in driving change. So again, I'm not sure it'd be a bad bet to go for that again, and it was only 4 marks last year. It's getting more difficult to do this though. How can I predict, for example, that it's gone round in a cycle and something might appear again? Like I say, the best bet is to try and know everything. But these are my educated guesses for medicine through time. Okay, on to crime and punishment next. Let's have a look at the crime and punishment exam for last year, 2024. Section A. Describe 2 features of crime that were committed in Whitechapel for 4 marks. Remember that will be split into 2 2-mark questions this year. 2A. How useful are sources A and B for an inquiry into conditions in lodging houses in the Whitechapel area? And then the follow-up inquiry of source A. Then Section B. Explain one way in which the treatment of the crime of witchcraft 1500 to 1700 was different from the treatment of the crime of witchcraft 1700 to 1900. Explain changes in transportation 1610 to 1868, North American colonies and the discovery of gold being the stimulus points. The most important factor affecting crime and punishment in the years 1000 to 1500 was attitudes in society. How far do you agree? Punishment in public and the Norman conquest were the stimulus points for this 16 marker. Or alternatively, the work of the police has changed significantly in the years 1829 to the present. How far do you agree? The introduction of the Criminal Investigation Department or CID and police patrols were the stimulus points for here. These topics have all been mentioned repeatedly. The Normans and the Forest Laws has appeared in 2019, 2023 and 2024. Medieval crimes has come up in 2018, 2022, 2023 and 2024, but that is a broad area, so there's lots of things I can ask about. Medieval deterrence and retribution is also a broad area. 2019, 2022, 2023 and 2024 it's come up. Medieval community, for example using the hue and cry in constables, has come up in 2019, 2022 and 2023 most recently. Renaissance crimes has come up 4 times as well, 2018, 2019, 2021 and 2023, but again this is a broad area. Prison reform has been reasonably popular, but it has been a couple of years, 2018, 2022 and 2023 it's last appeared. Young offenders in the modern era, I don't know why they keep on choosing that for a GCSE exam, but there we are, 2018, 2022 and 2023 that's appeared. For the Whitechapel section, employment and unemployment and the workhouses has come up 2018, 2019 and 2022. But there are a lot of areas in the Whitechapel exam, as we're going to see, that have never come up actually, so maybe this will not be touched on again, I don't know. Also weirdly, lodging houses has come up quite a lot as well, 2019, 2021 and 2024. So how are you going to read this then? The fact that these things have come up repeatedly, does that make them more or less likely to appear? Your guess is as good as mine, I'm afraid. Just as with medicine, this section should get smaller every year, the topics that have never appeared. In section A, the Peabody estate appeared in 2020, but do bear in mind that almost nobody did that particular exam, so we can almost consider it to have never appeared. Policing and H division also appeared in that 2020 exam. It was also relevant in section B in 2024, but remember the specific handling of policing is a bit different in section B to how it's specifically handled in the Whitechapel case study. National versus regional factors is the big one though, and this is really broad, so this is the use of things like CID, police records, public attitudes, government, etc. I'm pretty amazed that none of these things have come up before, and so if I was a betting man, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not, that might be where I'd go. But what about section B? Not so much for this. Perhaps the biggest surprise is that the gunpowder plot of 1605 has never appeared. Is this year its turn? Also, modern community law enforcement, for example Neighbourhood Watch, hasn't come up as well. Attitudes to crime has, so this might have been relevant, but as a discrete question it's not come up. Modern prevention of crime has also not come up. Again, broader campaigns have, but this as a discrete question hasn't. And in terms of case studies, Derek Bentley and the abolition of the death penalty has not come up either, although it did appear in that 2020 exam that almost nobody did. These topics have only rarely appeared. In section A, discontent and crime last appeared in 2019, so it's been a good while. Environment in Whitechapel only appeared in 2023, but not since and not before, so that's been very rare. Migration last appeared in 2018 as well, which is quite surprising. Whitechapel Vigilance Committees also last appeared in 2019, so it's been a good number of years for that one too. But what about section B? Law enforcement between 1500 and 1700, for example, watchmen and constables in towns, has appeared in 2018 and 2023, but it's quite a broad topic, and you'd have thought it would have come up more than that. Industrial definitions of crime, so for example the Tolpot Martyrs, last appeared in 2019, but not since. Pentonville Prison last appeared in 2018 as well, unless I've missed something. It may well have been relevant to other questions though, in fairness. And the abolition of the death penalty last appeared in 2018, and like I say, was part of the case study question in 2020, which hardly anyone did because of COVID. And the World Wars, the case study of conscientious objectors, hasn't come up since 2019 as a discrete question. Lastly, modern definitions of crime, so modern types of crime like terrorism, drugs offences, driving offences, that sort of thing, last appeared in 2021, but it's a broad area and that was only for a 4-mark question, so not much has been tested on it. Does that mean that these things might appear this year? Use this to guide your revision. Okay, on to our last section on warfare. Let's consider last year's exam for warfare through time. Section A. Describe 2 features of the significance of London as a target during the Blitz. That was a 4-mark question. Remember, it will be split into 2 2-mark questions this year. Then 2A. How useful are sources A and B for an inquiry into the difficulties faced in dealing with the effects of German attacks on London? And then the follow-up source inquiry from that. Then section B. Explain one way in which the fighting in the Battle of Waterloo, 1815, was different from the fighting in the war in Iraq, 2003. Then explain why there were changes in people's attitudes towards war during the modern period, 1900 to the present. Stimulus points were the press and conscientious objectors. And then you had a choice of the 16 markers. In the years 1250 to 1500, the most significant impact on the nature of warfare was the development of new weapons. How far do you agree? The stimulus points were longbows and feudal levies. And then question 6. Developments in artillery were the main reason for changes in the composition of armies in the year 1500 to 1900. How far do you agree? The stimulus points being the use of cannon and the professionalisation of the army. As far as I can tell, very few people did that question. Just as with medicine and crime and punishment, this is a section that should get smaller every year. These are the topics that have never appeared. In section A there's actually quite a few, but they need a bit of explanation. Firstly, the nature of German attacks on London has not come up as its own distinct question, but really I think this is more about contextual knowledge rather than something that you'll get a specific question on. However, what's much more specific is the weapons of the Blitz. Bomb types, for example, like the V1s and the V2s that came from 1944, but also simpler things, high explosives versus incendiaries and the ways that they affected London. I'm fairly surprised that this hasn't come up at all. Then the scale of attacks over time hasn't come up distinctly, but just like the nature of attacks, I'm not sure it would do. This is much more about understanding the context of the sources that you're reading. Are you reading a source that's at a particular point in the history of the Blitz where it was really intense, or maybe one of the lulls? The Bethnal Green disaster of 1943 as a case study has never appeared either. Section B is rather simpler. The composition of medieval and feudal armies has never come up as a distinct question, although I will point out it would have been relevant to lots of other questions as contextual knowledge and own knowledge. And also recruitment in the industrial era. It's been sort of relevant last year to the 16 mark question when it looked at the professionalisation of the army, but that's all. So it might be worth looking into that as well. These topics have only rarely appeared, at least as far as I can tell. In section A, government and the royal family last appeared in 2019, and perhaps related to that was the issue of morale, which also appeared last in 2019. Protecting significant buildings, which is probably quite a small topic really, for example the St Paul's photograph showing St Paul's surrounded by flames and fire, last appeared in 2021, but that's the only time it did. In section B there's a bit more. Medieval armies and their composition only really appeared in 2024. Now although that's recent, it's a big topic and it's the sort of thing that could come up again. Medieval effects on civilians though is also quite a big topic, and that last appeared in 2019. Renaissance effects on civilians only appeared in 2023, which again is maybe a slight surprise. The Battle of Waterloo has only appeared once, and that was only for a 4-mark question last year. Perhaps you might be thinking that it won't come up again this year, but I could imagine it being part of a wider question. Balaclava last appeared in 2019, so it's been a long time since that. And the Western Front and the Battle of the Somme last appeared in 2018, and that was only a 4-mark question on the use of tanks. This is such an important and major battle, I could well imagine it coming up this year in a much bigger role. But let's be honest, I'm only guessing. Our final points then. A reminder, these so-called predictions were more a demonstration of what topics have appeared only infrequently since 2018. Exam boards often use the same topics repeatedly. The only way of being sure is to try and know everything. Don't just focus your revision on the predictions. Instead, if a prediction happens to be an area you are weak on, use it as a guide to your revision. And don't come back to me if none of them come true. Like I say, I'm only guessing. What you can do though is you can check out the relevant final point slides on the videos and try and memorize the key points. And I wish you the best of luck with that. One final little bit of personal advice. Once the exam is done, just move on to the next one. Discussing it after the event is rarely helpful. Someone will only say something that you wish you'd included and you'll feel dreadful about it right the way until August. Don't do it to yourself. Once it's done, you can't do anything about it. Move on to paper 2, move on to paper 3, and the very best of luck. That's the end of this rapid revision video and my predictions for paper 1 for Edexcel for this year 2025. I hope it's been helpful. Check out my other playlists on the rapid revision topics and I wish you the very best of luck. Good luck!